My name is David. My friends and I, Liam and Chloe, were avid hikers. We loved exploring new trails, especially those less traveled. One summer, we decided to tackle a notoriously difficult and rarely used path in the Cascade Mountains, known locally as Widow's Peak Trail, not for any particular tragedy, as far as we knew, just because it was so isolated and challenging. We set off early, the air crisp and cool. The initial part of the trail was marked, albeit faintly, but after a few miles the markers disappeared, and the path became overgrown, almost indistinguishable from the surrounding forest floor. We were relying on an old map and a compass. Around midday we came to a fork. The map showed the main trail veering sharply to the right, uphill, but to the left there was another, fainter path, almost completely swallowed by ferns and low bushes. It wasn't on our map. Liam, ever the adventurer, suggested we check it out. "Just for a bit," he said. "See where it leads. Might be a shortcut or a hidden viewpoint." Chloe and I were hesitant. There was something about that path, a stillness, a heavy silence that seemed to emanate from it, different from the usual sounds of the forest. But Liam was already pushing through the undergrowth. Reluctantly, we followed. The path twisted and turned, descending gradually. The trees here were older, taller, their canopy so dense that very little sunlight filtered through. The air grew colder and the silence more profound. No birdsong, no rustling of small animals, just the crunch of our boots on the damp earth. After about 20 minutes, the path opened into a small, circular clearing. In the center stood a single gnarled oak tree, much older and larger than any we'd seen. Its branches were bare, twisted into grotesque shapes, even though it was summer, and hanging from its lower branches were things. Small, crudely made dolls of twigs and scraps of cloth. Dozens of them. They swayed gently in a breeze we couldn't feel. A wave of nausea hit me. Chloe gasped and grabbed my arm. Even Liam looked uneasy. "Okay," he said, his voice hushed. "Maybe not a viewpoint. Let's head back." We turned to leave, but the path we'd come down, it wasn't there. Or if it was completely indistinguishable from the dense thicket surrounding the clearing. We fanned out, searching, but it was like the forest had sealed itself behind us. Panic began to set in. We were lost in a place that felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. The dolls on the tree seemed to watch us with their blank, stitched eyes. Chloe started to cry softly. Liam was trying to get a signal on his phone, a desperate, futile effort. I kept looking at that tree, at those dolls, and then I noticed something else. Carved into the trunk of the oak, almost hidden by moss, were symbols, strange, looping, unfamiliar. As the sun began to dip, casting long, distorted shadows, we heard a sound, a low, guttural chanting, coming from deeper in the woods, in the direction we hadn't come from. It was getting closer. We didn't wait to see who or what was making it. We picked a direction, any direction, and plunged into the undergrowth, thorns and branches tearing at our clothes and skin. We ran blindly, stumbling, driven by a primal fear. The chanting seemed to follow us, always just behind. Hours later, bruised, scratched, and utterly exhausted, we stumbled out onto a logging road, miles from where we'd started. We never found Widow's Peak Trail again. We never spoke of the clearing, or the tree, or the dolls, or the chanting, to anyone but each other. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the quiet, I can almost hear that chanting again. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to the bone, that if we hadn't run, we would have become just another set of dolls, hanging silently from the branches of that ancient watching tree. My name is Mark, and this happened about 5 years ago when I was house-sitting for my aunt and uncle. Their place is pretty remote, a sprawling, older house on a few acres of land, bordered on three sides by dense, dark woods. The nearest neighbor was a good half-mile down a winding dirt road. It was late October, and the nights were already long and cold. The first few days were uneventful. I'd explore the woods during the day, read by the fire in the evenings. It was peaceful, almost too quiet. The silence of the woods at night, though, was a different beast. It wasn't empty, it was a silence that felt like it was listening. On the fourth night, I was in the living room, the only light coming from the TV and the dim glow of the fireplace. I had this strange, prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. I muted the TV and listened. Nothing. Just the crackle of the fire and the faint sigh of wind through the pines. I chalked it up to being alone in a big, unfamiliar house. I tried to get back into my movie, but the feeling persisted. I glanced towards the large bay window that looked out onto the backyard and the tree line beyond. The curtains were open a crack, and in that crack I thought I saw something, a flicker of movement just at the edge of the woods, where the moonlight barely reached. I told myself it was an animal, a deer, maybe a coyote, but it had felt taller, more upright. I got up, my heart thumping a little faster, and walked to the window. I pulled the curtain aside fully. The backyard was empty, bathed in the pale, eerie glow of the moon. The tree line was a solid wall of blackness. I scanned it back and forth, my eyes straining. Nothing. Just your imagination, Mark, I muttered, trying to sound braver than I felt. I was about to turn away when I saw it again. This time it was clearer. A figure, tall and gaunt, standing just inside the shadow of the first line of trees. It was too far to make out features, but it was unmistakably humanoid, and it was perfectly still, facing the house, facing me. A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't an animal. I backed away from the window slowly, my gaze fixed on the figure. It didn't move. It just stood there, a dark sentinel in the gloom. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy. Should I call someone? My uncle? The police? What would I even say? There's a tall, creepy guy standing in your woods. As I hesitated, the figure took a step. Not towards the house, but sideways, melting deeper into the shadows of the trees until it vanished completely. I didn't sleep much that night. I triple-checked all the locks, left every light in the house on. The next morning, in the harsh light of day, I went out to the tree line. There were no footprints, no broken branches, nothing to indicate anyone had been there. The rest of my stay was tense. Every creak of the old house, every rustle in the woods sent my heart racing. I never saw the figure again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, watching from the darkness of the tree line, waiting. Even now, years later, living back in the city, I sometimes feel that prickling on my neck, and I can't help but glance out the window, half expecting to see a tall, gaunt figure standing silently in the shadows, just watching. My name is Sarah. I used to be a late-night radio DJ at a small, independent station in a rural part of Oregon. The station itself was an old, slightly dilapidated building on the outskirts of town, surrounded by fields that stretched into darkness. My shift was from midnight to 6 a.m., and most nights I was the only one in the building. I loved the solitude, the feeling of being the only voice awake, broadcasting out into the quiet night. But one particular Tuesday, things took a turn. It started subtly. Around 3 a.m., during a long instrumental track, I heard a faint whisper in my headphones. It was so low, so brief, I thought I'd imagined it. I checked my levels, looked around the studio. Nothing. A few minutes later, it happened again. This time it was a little clearer, though still indecipherable, like someone murmuring just out of earshot, mixed in with the usual hum of the equipment. I took off my headphones, listened intently. The studio was silent. "Okay, Sarah, you're tired," I told myself, rubbing my eyes. But as the night wore on, the whispers became more frequent, a little louder. They seemed to be coming through the broadcast, woven into the static between songs, or even underneath the music itself. It wasn't a technical glitch. I checked the feeds, the transmitter. Everything was normal. Then the nature of the whispers changed. They started to sound personal. I couldn't make out words, but the tone felt directed, almost conversational, but with an undercurrent of something cold and unsettling. Around 4:30 a.m., I was queuing up the next song when a burst of static erupted through my headphones, much louder than usual. And in that static, clear as day, I heard a voice, a dry, raspy voice, say my name. Sra. I ripped the headphones off, my heart hammering. The studio was empty, the only sound the whirring of the old console fans. I was shaking. I tried to rationalize it, a stray signal, interference, my own exhaustion playing tricks on me. But then the on-air light, which was currently off as I was in a commercial break, flickered. Once, twice, and then it stayed on. A solid, baleful red, even though I hadn't touched the controls. The whispers started again, this time seemingly from the speakers in the studio itself, not just my headphones. They were all around me, a chorus of indistinct, sibilant sounds. I could feel the hairs on my arms stand up. I grabbed my bag and ran. I didn't even sign off. I just bolted out of the station, into the pre-dawn chill, and didn't stop running until I reached my car. I called in sick the next day, and the day after. When I finally went back, I asked the station manager if there had been any equipment malfunctions that night. He said everything was fine. No one else had reported anything unusual. I quit a week later. I couldn't shake the feeling of those whispers, the way that light had turned on by itself, the chilling certainty that whatever was on the airwaves that night knew who I was and was speaking directly to me. I still get chills when I hear static on the radio. It always sounds like it's just about to say my name.